Chapter 7 is probably one of the most important chapters that you can study. There's a lot of important chapters, but Chapter 7 and Chapter 8, you have to know them pretty cold, right? You have to know them. So if anything on your mind that you don't get, all right, you got to ask the questions. You are asking questions and that's good, but there's no such thing as too many. You need to understand this material, particularly this chapter. So if you haven't read the chapter in your book, I'm begging you, please go back, review the notes that we've gone over. We've still got a couple more things, a couple of important things, all right? Review the notes, read the book, make sure you understand Chapter 7. It's all about agency. And agency is when we start dealing with people. And I can tell you that the Real Estate Commission asks a lot of questions about agency because they want to make sure that you start dealing with people, you're doing the right thing. You're going to learn when we start talking about Appendix A that the purpose of the Real Estate Commission and the real estate license law is to protect the public. That is their one mandate, protect the public. You having a license, are you part of that? You are not. You're not the public. So their job is to protect the public from who? You, me, because we want to do this. So therefore, that's their mandate. So that's why it's important to know how agency works and what we're supposed to do, right? And you need to know that right from the beginning. So this is one of those pretty large chapters that are going to be in your testing material, and you're going to have to live with this, all right? You're going to have to live with this. So please make sure that in your head, you're clear, all right? And there's no such thing as, I didn't feel right about asking questions. No, you need to ask questions, okay? You need to ask questions. So somebody walks into your office and says, I want to sell my house. And you say, what? What's the first thing you say to them other than, hey, how are you? You want to guess? Hey, how are you? Are you currently working with anybody? Yeah, are you working with somebody, right? You're going to get to the seller's agency agreement in a minute, but you want to explain to them what we're going to talk about next, which is our disclosure of agency relationships. Now, when we get to it, I'm going to show you a couple of quick videos. Now, there are a lot alike, these two videos. They come from the Real Estate Commission, but I think you got to see both of them because the gentleman, Stephen, who's doing these is really pretty good at it. And he's talking about working with real estate brokers. And that's where we're at now, okay? So we're going to show the seller video first, and then we're going to show the buyer video because the buyer is going to be a little different, right? Because of why? Oral buyer's agency, right? Then I'm going to show you the forms that we're going to be working with, the working with real estate agent forms. So we're going to spend the next hour doing this, or at least a good portion of it, all right? And this is really where it's going to be where the rubber hits the road, all right? So one of the first things you're going to do, if not the first thing you're going to do, is say, hey, how are you? Are you working with anybody? No. All right, good. Let's talk about agency. Let me give you the disclosure. Let's talk about the different types. All right, and I'll show you the form. I'll actually read you the form so you hear it for the first time, okay? This is probably one of the most important forms that you need to have explained to you because you could give away your entire position on your purchasing. The job is to tell you what your agency relationships could be, right? So if you're there and you don't hire somebody and let's say you walk in and I'm sitting in the office and I walk in and I say, hey, welcome, let's come in, come on inside into the conference room. And the minute we start talking about first substantial contact, I'm not talking about the weather. I'm not talking about, hey, I'm really liking Topsail. I'm thinking about buying a house here, but I'm not sure when or where or anything else like that. I want, the minute we get into a specific topic, that's substantial contact. And at first substantial contact, I need to explain what agency is. Because if you walk in there and you start, I'm going to promise you that one thing is that people love to talk about themselves. People love to talk about themselves. And the truth is, they'll tell you anything. If you ask the right questions, you can get anybody to tell you anything. So what we want is to make sure that they're advised as to who they're working for, who they're working with. If they don't hire me, let's say everybody, they all do it. Seller, he wants to interview multiple agents, or they say, well, we're going to talk to other agents before we hire somebody to list our house. Do you know, technically, you're not supposed to get any confidential information from them until they sign the contract, which is the listing agreement. Same thing with the buyer. Buyer's not supposed to tell you what price they're willing to pay, what terms, or what motivation until they hire you, either in an oral buyer's agreement or a listing agreement. Let's say I go for a listing and I don't get the listing, but Joseph gets the listing. But when I was there, they gave me a whole lot of information. So now I go back to my office. I feel a little bad. In walks a buyer who says, I need to see a house. And I say, okay, will you sign the buyer's agency agreement? And they say, yes. And then I say, okay, where do you want to go? And they want to go to Joseph's listing. Do I have an unfair advantage? When I went for that listing agreement, what happened? They told me everything, didn't they? What they would accept, why they were moving, would they accept cash? Would they finance anything? They told it to me. And then they didn't have it. Yeah, I have a ton of information. Now, am I obligated now because my buyer hired me, signed a contract, said that I want you to be my agent? Am I obligated now to tell all of that information to my buyer? Yeah, that's the D, right? That's the D, disclosure. I'm obligated. I'm going. I have to, right? That's why you have to protect the consumers. Now, I don't want to say people love to just give you information. Sometimes they should just shut up, all right? But, what's Ron White say? You have the right to remain silent, but do you have the ability to do so? All right? We blab a lot of stuff. We just love to talk about ourselves. Same thing with buyers. Buyers come in and start yakking about all of these things, and they don't hire you. They decide that it's not a good thing. And then I find out that I see them walking up the street. So now I have all this information. Look, if I have an hour-long conversation with a buyer and the buyer walks away telling everybody what I told them, is that a big deal? No. I want the word to get out. I'm not going to say anything that's going to get me in trouble, unless I lie, obviously. But if we have an hour-long conversation and that buyer or that seller gives me all of that information and they don't hire me, and I go out and blab it to everybody else because I'm obligated to, can I do damage to them? Yeah, I sure can. You have to be able to tell them what this is. All right. So forewarned is forearmed, right? Forewarned is forearmed. All right, so let's talk about this agency disclosure, and I'm going to show it to you in a second. This is called the Mandatory Working with Real Estate Agents brochure, or the disclosure form. We've changed from a long brochure to a disclosure form. And it has to be reviewed at first substantial contact of every sales transaction. Every sales transaction, not rentals, not soliciting for business, but every residential and commercial sales transaction, right? So we're going to ask for them to sign this disclosure when we go over it, all right? So this disclosure form's proof that we gave it to them, that we told them. Forewarned is forearmed, as somebody said, right? We're giving it to you. We're telling you, shut up. Here's your opportunity. Hire me and I'll keep it confidential. You don't hire me and guess who's going to know? All right. That's just the way it is. And that's what it says. in nicer language, but yes, that's what it says. All right. Sales contracts, residential and commercial, yes. Agricultural, industrial, that is a different breed of cat. I honestly don't dabble in it, and we don't teach it, so I have no idea. No, that is for residential and commercial. That's the two that the Real Estate Commission point out. So live with that, okay? All right, first substantial contact occurs when a consumer's motivation for participation in a real estate agency is disclosed. My company just transferring all of their jobs from Wilmington to Charlotte. I need to go. Is that motivation? If I'm a seller? That sounds like motivation to me. A buyer comes into the office and says, hey, I got 30 days to purchase a house because my job's moving here. Is that motivation? It sounds like motivation, right? Specific and clear. That's first substantial contact. Or a buyer walks in and says, hey, I got $500,000 here to purchase a house. Can you help me? He gave me some money. That's first substantial contact, right? So we got to wall him down and say, before we go any further, don't give me any more information. Let's go through this. All right. And if he told me it was cash, that would be price, terms, and motivation, right? So there's the terms. Again, first substantial contact. All right. So we need to disclose agency status in writing before this conversation moves from info on the property to info about the prospective buyer or seller. I can tell them about a property. I can tell them about all of that stuff, right? I can show them the property as long as they don't give me any information. The minute they do give me that information, I got to stop them and we got to give them the disclosure. Best thing to do when they come in, this is for sellers. Now, this is a one-page document for sellers. And then on the back, it's one page for buyers. That's how this document would print. All right. One page on the front for sellers, one on the back for buyers. This used to be a heck of a lot longer. When we see the disclosure, when we talk about the brochure after we're done with these, you're going to see that that brochure that we're going to show you was most of what the Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure was. It was a trifold disclosure. It was 2 pages and it was huge and tiny writing and had a lot on it. They cut it down. 1 page for sellers, 1 for buyers. We're going to read them both so that you get them. All right. All right. Working with Real Estate Agents disclosure for sellers. This form is not a contract. Signing this disclosure only means you have received it. In a real estate sales transaction, it's important that you understand whether an agent represents you. Real estate agents are required to review this form with you at first substantial contact before asking for or receiving your confidential information, and give you a copy of the form after you sign it. This is for your own protection. Do not share any confidential information with a real estate agent or assume that the agent is acting on your behalf until you have entered into a written agreement with the agent to represent you. Otherwise, the agent can share your confidential information with others. All right, note to agent, check all the relationship types below that may apply to this seller. All right, so we would put check marks here, just what they said, all right? So seller's agency. The agent who gave you this form and the agent's firm must enter into a written listing agreement with you before they begin to market your property for sale. If you sign the listing agreement, the listing firm and its agents would then represent you. The buyer would either be represented by an agent affiliated with a different real estate firm or be unrepresented. Okay, bring the buyer. That's seller's agency. But let's introduce dual agency and designated agency here. All right, dual agency will occur if your listing firm has a buyer client who wants to purchase your property. If you agree in a written agency agreement, the real estate firm and any agent with the same firm would be permitted to represent you and the buyer at the same time. A dual agent's loyalty would be divided up between you and the buyer, but the firm and its agents must treat you and the buyer fairly and equally and cannot help you gain an advantage over the other party. That sentence is really pretty critical. That's the explanation, all right? So a dual agency's loyalty would be divided between you and the buyer, but the firm and its agents must treat you and the buyer fairly and equally and cannot help you gain an advantage over the other party. That's what dual agency is all about. Okay, that's what it is. All right, designated agent, designated dual agent. If you agree in a written agency agreement, the real estate firm would represent you, both you and the buyer, but the firm would designate one agent to represent you and a different agent to represent the buyer. Each designated agent would be loyal only to their client. Okay, only to their client. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. All right, now, what if I'm working with a for sale by owner, FSBO? Ruh-roh, FSBO. They ain't represented by anybody, are they? For sale by owner. They didn't want to deal with real estate agents to begin with. Do I have to give them one of these forms if I'm working with the buyer? I do, because it's a sales, it is a sales contract, or it's a sales agreement in residential. But I would check this last one here. It says buyer working agent working with an unrepresented seller, a for sale by owner, a FSBO. The agent who gave you this form will not be representing you and has no loyalty to you. The agent will represent only the buyer. Do not share any confidential information with this agent. I'm telling you, don't share it with me, because if you do, I'm going to go back and blab it to my buyers. All right. Note to seller. For more information on an agent's duties and services, refer to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission's questions and answers on working with real estate agents. I'll show you that brochure after we're done here. All right. Or ask an agent for a copy of it. We should give it to them. Seller's signature, if there's two, and then the date. All right. Now, you cannot force them to sign. You can tell them it's a disclosure, they're not obligated, and it just shows that you're doing your job. But you can't force them. You can't take their hand and make them force them to sign it. You have to sign it, though. Agent's name. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret. Everything you sign, every document going forward, is going to have your name and your license number on it. Every single one. Your name and your license number. You're going to have to put it on there. Right? And the firm name. Now, if I gave this to a seller and they refused to sign it, I'd put a little note in here that says I gave it to Mr. and Mrs. Smith on January 3rd, 2023, and they refused to sign it at 4 p.m. in the evening. And then I'd put it in a file. Because this is auditable material, right? This is one of those forms that you need. This is one of those forms that you need that if you get audited, you're going to need it. Now, when we look at the buyer side, it's a lot like the seller side, only got some little different quirks in it. This form is not a contract. This is working for buyers, right? Signing this disclosure only means you have received it. Again, it's important you understand whether an agent represents you. We're required to review this form with you before asking or receiving confidential information and give you a copy of it, all right? Do not share any confidential information with a real estate agent or assume that the agent is acting on your behalf until you've entered into an agreement with the agent to represent you. Otherwise, the agent can share your confidential information with others. Now, basically, what we're going to talk about. Buyer's agent. If you agree, the agent who gave you this form and the agent's firm would represent you as a buyer's agent and be loyal to you. You may begin with an oral agreement, but your agent must enter into a written buyer's agency agreement with you before preparing a written offer to purchase or communicating an oral offer for you. The seller would either be represented by an agent affiliated with a different real estate firm or be unrepresented. For sale by owners and unrepresented. Dual agency and designated agency again. Dual agency will occur if you purchase a property listed with the firm that represents you. If you agree, the real estate firm and any agent with the same firm would be permitted to represent you and the seller at the same time. A dual agent's loyalty would be divided between you and the seller, but the firm and its agents must treat you and the seller fairly and equally and cannot help you gain advantage over the other party. All right. Little asterisk there says that any agreement between you and an agent that permits dual agency must be put in writing no later than the time you make an offer to purchase. And then we talk about designated agency again. If you agree, the real estate firm would represent both you and the seller, but the firm would designate one agent to represent you and a different agent to represent the seller. Each designated agent would be loyal only to their client. Now, unrepresented buyer, this is our seller subagent, all right? The agent who gave you this form may assist you in your purchase, but will not be representing you and has no loyalty to you. The agent will represent the seller. Do not share any confidential information with this agent. So if they don't want to sign a listing agreement with me, fine, we gave them the form, but I'm going to go represent the seller if I can. If they've given me information, I am responsible for what? Note to buyer. Again, ask for the questions and answers working with real estate brochures. These two forms, whether they're a buyer or a seller, have to be done and they have to be put on file. Do we do it for just buyers or just sellers? A lot of agents in their forte have ended up doing this as part of the stack of papers that they give everybody when they get to when they start writing a contract. Let's sign these all off and we'll get done with them. Well, that's all fine when the real estate commission comes in and audits you and you give them the information and you show them all of these forms that you had signed, except for one thing. It says it has to be done for everybody, right? Do you have 100% compliance? Everybody you talk to is a seller, has sold a house, and everybody you talk to buys a house? Not in my book. I hope you do. And if you do, let me know. So what the real estate commission is going to do when they do your audit is they're going to come in and say, okay, I got your buyers and your sellers. Where's the forms for the people who didn't buy or didn't sell? Where are those? And that's when we get the Ralph Cramden out of the agents that says, right? All right, none of you remember Ralph Cramden. Honeymooners way back in the day. Don't worry about it. All right. Thank you, Wayne. Appreciate Wayne on knowing who the honeymooners were. But now you got agents looking around. They don't know. They never did the forms. And now you got a problem because you're supposed to do it at first substantial contact. And that's the key. Not when they buy the house, not when they sell the house, first substantial contact. That's well before they buy or sell. That's where we get in trouble. All right. This has to be done for everybody, right, at first substantial contact. You all good? Everybody get it? Important document. You need to know how to do it. You need to know how to explain it. You need to know what's there. Let me show you the brochure. And I gave you a copy of the brochure. So you have both of these. Good to read this. Now, if I'm going to use the brochure to tell a potential buyer or seller what agency is all about, wouldn't that be a good thing for somebody who is going to take a test on agency to study, to use, to learn what agency is all about? Except that in its spirit, it's intended, right? But read this. This thing does give you all the information about agency. It tells you all of it, the things you need to know about it, right? We're going to give it to the client, but you should know it. It helps you. All right, this will help you. So first things first, this is the front of the brochure, looks something like this. And it says working with real estate agents. All right. So technically, when we take it down to about 80%, this is what it looks like. It used to be able to be folded up into 3 different sections and be a trifold. It's not helpful for that. And it's 2 pages. So really this working with real estate agents is the front, but we want to start here at the back where it says questions and answers on working with real estate agents. So first things, right? Gives you all that information. Find it helpful to refer to a real estate agent to assist you. Real estate agents can provide useful services. All right. It's important for you to know whether an agent is representing you. Okay. bold print is going to be important. Do not share any confidential information with a real estate agent or assume the agent is acting on your behalf until you've entered into a written agency agreement. Okay. So again, it tells you why. Now, everything also, remember I said you're going to sign, your name's going to be on there, your license number is going to be on there, and every other form that you're going to see is going to have a fair housing statement in it, right? A non-discrimination clause, if you will. Okay. All right. I'm just going to go through the questions. You guys can read this. All right. It'd probably be worth your time to read it. So what does the word agency mean? Here is the description of what an agency is. What is an agency agreement, right? What is an agency agreement? That would be something I'd want to know. All right. Is there a standard length of time for agency agreements? No. No, there's not. While we're talking about it, let me answer this question. For a listing agreement, you got to find out how long it takes for the average house to sell. So if it's average is 100, now I know they've been selling super fast, but on a normal market, 140 to 130 to 140 days, 6 months is fair, right? You got a time to sell it and close on it. But if it's selling in 200 days, 6 months is not enough, is it? You'll make the next realtor who comes along and takes your job very happy. They'll be able to sell it relatively quickly, right? So you got to make sure it's long enough, fit in there. Now, the buyer's agency agreement is where people start freaking out. You don't even know, they don't know if they like you. And the truth is, you don't know if you like them either. What if you don't like somebody? I don't mean that personally. I mean that you can tell right away. If you get into a 6-month buyer's agency agreement with somebody that you're not compatible with, you got to live with it. You are being hired to help them. And if they're being miserable, that's 6 months of ugly time. And they're going to end up not buying something anyway, right? Or they're going to be miserable and grouchy and everything else that you're working with, and that's okay. That's their prerogative, as long as you think you're heading towards a closing. But remember that once we get into the contract, the easy part is over. When we start doing the contract and the due diligence and all the pressure of putting money up and then doing certain things to get to the closing, that's when the pressure comes up. That's when the pressure comes up. So if they're not real happy campers at the beginning, during the easy stuff, you think it's going to get better when the pressure improves or gets hotter? So why not make a buyer's agency agreement for a week? And you work together and you find out if they're serious, and you can always extend it. You can make it for 6 months. You can make it for any length you want. You do not have to have it for a certain length of time. Make it for, if they're serious about it and they want to look at houses for the next 3 weeks, make it for the 3 weeks. If they get the 3 weeks and they're very close and you see it's heading in the right direction, extend it. It's okay. But if they don't, and they've been miserable to you for 3 weeks, calling you to all do hours, and you really think they're not serious, your 3 weeks ends, what happens? Agency over. And there's an old saying that goes like this: everybody brings happiness. Everybody. Some by coming, some by going. Right? You will be a happier camper if they leave. Right? You want to sell something to everybody, don't get me wrong. But we're all people, right? We all have our things. I'll let you pick 100 of your best friends, and I bet that there's 5 or 6 of them on that list that you could live without. Right? It's just the way it is. That's just people, right? So there's not matches for everybody. So you don't want to be obligated longer than you have to be, and you want to force them to get to the table, right? You don't get paid unless you get to the table. That's it. You get paid at the closing, after the closing. Until then, you're working for free. Now, I understand that we're not looking for, we're all looking for a paycheck, but we're also there to, get people to the end game. But if they're not going to the end game, you got to find somebody who is, right? So you got to look at that. All right, so that's standard length of time. Is there a standard fee? No. Everybody says, is it 4%, 5%, 6%? Everything is negotiable, and we'll talk about that at the beginning of chapter 8, right? When we start talking about the antitrust laws. Everything is negotiable. So there is no standard fee, right? What do I need to know about working with real estate agents? What are the listing agents' duty to the seller, right? How's the listing firm compensated? What services might a listing agent provide? These are all good stuff. This is good stuff for you to read. If I list my property with a real estate firm that also represents the buyer and wants to buy my property, what happens then? Talks about dual agency, all right? So all of these things, and those are just general questions. Then we have questions and answers for buyers here. And on the next page, we have how to terminate our agency agreements. What about dual agency? It's all here, all right? All these things. Why do I have to have a written agency agreement? So this is all really good information. And I'd spend some time with a highlighter. I'd print this one out, all right? I'd print it out and go in there and just try to get there, okay? All right. Does anybody have any questions on those two? Critical form, all right? First substantial contact.
If you like this video, feel free to share it with a friend. For more real estate education content, please subscribe to the channel. From all of us at Seacoast Real Estate Academy, thank you for watching.